Uh, well, thank you for having me, and I hope that this talk will be of interest to everyone. It's about interferometric detections of stripped subdwarf companions around BE stars. So let me start with a bit of a massive star and binary evolution. So massive stars, and here I will talk about both massive stars. Actually, I will focus on the more intermediate type stars, which are B-type stars. So very important stars, of course, for the galactic environment and everything, evolution. The important aspect of these stars is binarity. So basically, almost all O-type stars are binaries, it seems, and at least half of B-type stars are binaries. And as it turns out, not only does this affect the evolution of the systems and of the stars, in contrast to single star evolution, in fact, the binary interactions dominate the evolution of massive stars. So it's really something which can't be dismissed. So very important stuff. Basically, all binaries with periods below about 5 years will exchange mass, which will completely alter their state. Also, furthermore, basically, it's possible that most rapid rotators were spun up by binary mass transfer, and that about 1/3 of massive main sequence stars are in fact, that we observe today, are in fact binary evolution products. And this brings me to BE stars, which is a subclass of B-type star population, about 15 to 40% of B-type stars, depending on the metallicity of the environment. And they are, in fact, rapidly rotating B-type stars, which have circumstellar disks that are self-ejected. So in fact, if you look at this diagram here, so we have two main sequence stars. One of them evolves beyond the Roche lobe. There is mass transfer, and what becomes of this is a helium star or a subdwarf star, and then a rejuvenated star, which can be spun up by this process. So in fact, this is a BE star here, which was spun up, and it has a stripped star companion. This is just an illustration of emission lines of BE stars. This is how we recognize them, because they have emission lines from the circumstellar disk, and the appearance of the lines depends on the viewing angle. So the binary origin is definitely one of the channels which can form BE stars, and it has been theorized about a lot. And different models, in fact, predict different proportions on if it's most of them or if it's only a few, only a smaller fraction of them. Because in fact, there's at least two other channels that are possible for the BE star to acquire the rapid rotation, which is an essential property to form the disk. So this holds a key to why there are BE stars, why they form disks. So this can be achieved by the binary mass transfer in a closed binary system, but also there are two other channels, at least. It can be primordial, possibly, and the star can spin up during main sequence evolution as the stellar core contracts. In fact, it's probably a combination of all these effects, because we observe, for example, that post-mass transfer BE stars, they continue to rotate near critical for a long time. It's not like they shed the excess angular momentum and spin down again. They continue to spin up. So there must be these effects in concert. So if we consider only the mass transfer in closed binary system, then the possible outcomes are BE stars with a neutron star companion. These are seen as BE X-ray binaries. Then we can see BE subdwarf binaries, or also sometimes called BE star helium star binaries. This is what I will focus on here. There are about 20 confirmed at this point. BE white dwarf binaries are deficient, which is somewhat of a mystery. There's currently one reported case of BE black hole binary, but it has been recently ruled out. This will come out soon. Yeah, and the other outcomes would be that the stars can be runaway stars or possibly post-mergers as well. And considering that this channel is the dominant one, there should be basically no cases of a BE star with a main sequence star companion, or BE star, like a binary BE star, two BE stars. So that has not been observed to this case, which supports the mass transfer formation channel for BE stars. And this is just to show what we can do if we can obtain an actual full binary orbital solution for such a system. So this was 5 Persei. Here we have an astrometric orbit. This was possible thanks to interferometry because of separations on the order of milliarc seconds. And also the companion is really faint, about a few percent in the H band. So this was very challenging to obtain this astrometric orbit. This was obtained by Murar 2015. And here we also have a double-lined spectroscopic orbit. So this is the primary BE star. You see small amplitude because it's much more massive than the secondary star, and difficulty in measuring the RVs here because the lines are broadened due to the rotation and other difficulties. But the secondary star, we can see these RVs were measured in ultraviolet, which we need to go to ultraviolet because these stars contribute more there because they are hot. And by cross correlation of ultraviolet spectra, we can get RV curve of the secondary too. Here, these data points are from Hubble Space Telescope. And so by this, we can measure not only the masses, but also independently the distance. And this, just to illustrate what we can learn from this solution, is basically we can, from theoretical models, we can determine the progenitor masses, we can determine the age and other details of this. So this is extremely important. And this was actually the first BE stars for which we have dynamical masses. Here I just compiled all of the BE sdO, the subdwarf O-star systems that are known or suspected. And we can see one thing in common here, which is that the separation is of the order of 0.4 to 1.1 AU, which at these distances, these are really nearby stars. This translates to a few milliarc seconds of separation or less. So we need optical interferometry for this. This was until recently the only one which was detected. This is the delta H magnitude. But recently I will be talking more about, I obtained 3 more detections recently for these 3 stars. And this is just a compilation of how all these sdO systems were found, most of them actually in UV spectroscopy, but also some of them in interferometry and candidates based on appearance of optical spectroscopy. So to increase the number of dynamical masses among BE stars and to understand these systems better, I started a survey of binarity with Chara Merkex. It's almost finished at this point. I observed, the plan was to observe up to 40 targets, which will probably be completed. So the goal was to detect new companions, subsequently map their orbits, combine with spectroscopy and obtain dynamical masses in the end, which are necessary to place BE stars in the proper place in the evolution of B-type stars. And as a, so we can detect the companions using closure phases mostly, but as a byproduct, in fact, we obtain also information on the circumstellar disk. And if it is resolved, we can measure its size, inclination, and position angle. This was the first detection I obtained here. So here the disk is barely resolved, but we can see a signal in closure phase about 2-3 degrees, which is a strong signature of binary here, which is separated by about 2 milliarc seconds and contributes about 1.4% in the H band. And this is the star which was detected. Unfortunately, for this one, we don't have orbit yet because we only have 3 points which only cover this small arc of the orbit. But the precision we reach is about tenths of micro-arseconds, so pretty good. Here we have RVs only of the secondary star, and this was measured from IUE spectra, so from old ultraviolet spectra, so the precision is not that great. But moving on, we have another star here, which for which I was able to obtain 4 orbital points here. And we have a nice RV curve of the secondary again, from this time from Hubble Space Telescope, from 6 epochs. So this is much better quality, of course. And we can actually obtain the first estimate of the dynamical masses here. And one interesting thing to note here is that the subdwarf is possibly massive enough to explode in a supernova, forming subsequently a BE X-ray binary. This was the 3rd star that I reported on. Here we have 5 orbital points, I believe. Here we actually don't have the RV curve of the secondary. We don't have enough ultraviolet spectra, but we have RV curve of the primary, which was published at some point. This is somewhat noisy, so this might be still preliminary. In fact, there is a bit of a discrepancy in the masses in which my result shows that the masses are kind of lower than what was thought previously. And also the orbit is slightly eccentric, which is pretty unusual for these systems. Only one other system is known to be slightly eccentric. And this is my recent work, which is not published yet. So I was able to obtain another orbit, this time for Kappa Dra, and this is including actually archival Merck data as well. And here I decided, because there was not really nothing great in the literature, even though there is a preliminary orbit, I decided to measure my own RVs. And here I was able to obtain espadons and narwhal spectra, which have a resolution of about 80,000, which is really needed to measure precisely these RVs of BE stars because of the rotational broadening and non-radial pulsations and other things complicating these measurements. So here, this is another set. This will be published soon, hopefully. And this is the first such orbit for actually a late type BE star. Overall, I have at least 2 more detections, actually maybe even more. And overall, this translates to about 20 to 25% detection rate. So out of the 40 intended targets, hopefully we're going to have about 10 new sets of fundamental parameters and dynamical masses here. And to summarize, majority of BE stars are likely mass transfer products. We now have dynamical masses for at least 4 in total, sorry. This is something which I didn't have time to mention. Triple systems are also very useful sometimes to obtain dynamical masses. So far, there is one system for which we were able to obtain a very, here the BE star is an outer component of a hierarchical triple, and we were able to obtain very precise mass for that one. And this whole project aims towards the first statistically significant set of BE star fundamental parameters and dynamical masses. And that is all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, are there questions in the room? Don't see any online. So I have one question. So I saw that your sample, most of the stars are. The chat was not updated. Okay. So I was wondering. So your stars are all closer than 1 kiloparsecs, and are there plans to go beyond that limit and to see farther away, or what are the limitations for that?
Yeah, good question. So actually, the way we have to do it is volume limited sort of sample, because if we go beyond, so I selected targets from within 500 to 600 parsecs, and that is because of the separation. So at these typical periods, which are of the order of months, we need to be able to resolve the orbit for the orbit to have at least, so for Chara, let's say more than ½ milliarc second of the semi-major axis. So we need to be within 1 kiloparsec for these typical periods, because the BE subdwarf binaries have periods of under a year, definitely. So if it was beyond 1 kiloparsec, we would not resolve the astrometric orbit, not even with Chara.
Okay, thank you very much. No questions. So let's thank you, Robert, again.